This is The Professionals, a podcast by music business technology and broadcast media technology students on Outcast OCCR Owens Community College Radio. In this series, students will interview industry professionals in their respective fields to help gather an idea of what it's like to work in their industry.
Hello and welcome to the Industry Professional Podcast. My name is Vince Armstrong and today we have a special guest, Eric Berger. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and what you're currently doing?
Yes, well, an artist, audio engineer, and producer was my first degree and background. I worked in LA, had a record deal, and then went back to Ohio where I spent 10 years studying entertainment MBA curriculum as well as the art and science of human connection as it relates to music, and then shipped off to Full Sail where I'm currently enrolled getting my bachelor's and master's in entertainment business and entrepreneurship, and I'm pursuing a neuromarketing study for music, the experience of music, both live and recorded.
Can you share an example of a successful brand and music project you've been involved in and what made it stand out?
I can, but I would really like to start with, can you describe the process for integrating a brand's identity into a musical experience? Because that would lay the foundation of everything else that I'm going to talk about. Basically, the brand is inherent into the person, the song, the artist, the act, whatever the product is. The core story in essence, but it's the way branding functions on the psychological level, which has to do with the psychological underpinnings of human beings and the 10 emotional conduits that we currently know allow for a product, idea, or a person to connect to another human being on a deep and meaningful level. It's not like an artificial thing like sitting in a marketing room with a bunch of execs creating a product and a campaign for someone to adhere to. It's really about going through their story and learning about them and then extracting the 10 pillars from their story and from their product or from their art so that they're properly communicated to create the strongest possible emotional connection in all of your marketing. For sake of clarity, marketing is essentially every touch point that an artist, a product, or an idea has with its audience. So every business card, every phone call, every poster, every interview, all those things are marketing. To dive into that just a little bit more, the process that I'm focused on, which is kind of experience engineering, deals with clarifying those and working with artists and pulling and extracting them out.
How do you build long-term value for both the artists and the brands you work through music?
When you talked about sharing an example of a successful brand, this is where it kind of clarifies the brand pillars. Early on, we worked a little bit with ICP, the Insane Clown Posse, and did shows with them. And then when I started doing my deep research on what a brand is and how it functions, of the 200 acts that I went through and analyzed in all of music, Insane Clown Posse was the only one that has all 10 pillars clearly identified. And the 10 emotional conduits, or the 10 pillars as they're described by Martin Lindstrom, who is the neuromarketer who did the first neuromarketing study, and then he's gone on to write books and he consults and he has tremendous success. But the 10 pillars that he identified, and I'll explain them through how ICP has implemented them. They have done this instinctually. They didn't read any books. They just naturally gravitated and somehow got it perfectly right, which in my opinion makes them even more genius. There's a clear vision. That's pillar number one. And ICP's version of that is the wicked carnival or the dark carnival. Then there's a sense of belonging. That happened when ICP fans took on the name and started calling themselves Juggalos. They've been able to play off that and establish things like the gathering of the Juggalos and the whoop whoop cry that they use. All these things reinforce that sense of belonging. There's stories, which is the third pillar. For them, it was the Dark Carnival concept, but then also, like with their first 6 full-length albums, each one was a Joker's card. Each Joker had a different kind of storyline to it as well. Each one of their songs, especially in the early days, were really laid out in story format. The next thing would be evangelism. And one of the things that ICP did that worked out tremendously for them was that they invited mom and pop record stores out to their house to hang out for like a Sunday brunch and just sort of hang out. And during that time, they would kind of explain their brand and who their target audience was. When my first interaction with ICP happened, it was a earth-shattering moment where the store owner stopped what he was doing. He stopped himself and interrupted another conversation and was like, "Oh my God, dude, this is your stuff." And he went down this rabbit hole selling me on it. Naturally walked out of there with it because of his level of enthusiasm the second I brought them up or noticed them. The pillar number 5 would be grandeur, which is the pro wrestling approach, their little synchronized clown walk that they did at the beginning of their concerts, the poster campaign that they had. Everything with them was presented a little bit larger than life. Mystique, which was the wearing of their makeup and always sort of concealing their identities. 7 would be symbols, which was the embodiment of the clown logos as well as the Hatchet Man logo. 8 is rituals, the gathering of the Juggalos and the annual Hollow Wicked events, the Devil's Night, spraying of Faygo, the crowd participating and painting themselves up. Those are all rituals. And then there's enemies or juxtaposition. And for ICP in the early days, it was easy. There were people who liked ICP and everyone else. Everyone else hated ICP. And then there's sensory appeal, which is also the use of the makeup. And then their fans copied that, as well as like spraying Faygo during the shows. All these things made for a multi-sensory experience. It became a participatory culture, which is essential in this day and age. But all of that is what gives their brand the strength over their audience, or the strong emotional connection that people have to their audience. So that's kind of how it functions and a good example of it.
How do you build long-term value for both the artists and the brands you work through music?
It's really about getting the right brand, helping them to understand. The toughest part about this thing is that knowledge and skill have to be achieved organically. You got to put in the work. Just like I'm giving this interview and someone's going to look over the transcript or take the bits from it and try and run with it. If they don't really understand and they haven't put in time reading a book or practicing these concepts over and over, it's what I call the Tony Hawk syndrome. You can live next door to Tony Hawk and go over to his half pipe every day for 10 years straight and ask him to explain every microsecond of what he's doing within a maneuver. But at the end of 10 years, you're not getting on a skateboard, dropping in and pulling a 720. The only way you can do that is to earn it, to pay in flesh and put yourself through it. Intellectual knowledge and ability is no different. A lot of people are just looking for the little gold nuggets in conversations, and they think that translates to their own intelligence. And it's really deeper than that. You got to put in the work. That's really the essence of building long-term value. I can come in and talk to an artist for a day or two and kind of lay things out, but the hard truth of it is I try to get them to understand you're going to have to do a little bit of this yourself, because you need to understand how these work. Because what happens when you do understand them is that your ideas come out at the moment of conception perfectly shaped to fit and to be plugged right into the marketplace. You don't have to do all this scheming and making it up as you go along, which exhausts a ton of energy and really produces zero results. When you do the homework up front, the actual implementation is very effortless.
Well, that's about all the time we have, Eric. I want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
It was a pleasure, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
This has been the Professionals Podcast by Music Business Technology and Broadcast Media Technology students. Join us next time on Outcast OCCR, Owens Community College Radio.